Seattle lay under a curtain of rain that refused to let up, the kind that blurred the skyline and made the entire city seem quieter than it really was. At exactly 11:59 p.m. inside Hale Manor, the storm pressed hard against the glass walls, while the interior remained silent except for the frantic beeping of a medical monitor. Ethan Hale lay on the polished wooden floor of his study, breath hitching as his fingers twitched toward the small amber bottle that had already spilled across the floor. The pills lay scattered like tiny white stars around him, mocking him with the reminder that he had run out of time. The LED panel on the wall flashed red as an automated voice whispered cardiac arrest detected, like a sentence delivered with cruel indifference. Ethan tried to pull in air, but his chest tightened sharply, as if an invisible fist had closed around his heart. He forced himself upright onto one elbow jaw, clenched vision doubling. Every breath felt like it came through shattered glass. A memory flickered across his mind at the same brutal moment. The last time he had felt this pain, he was 29, standing backstage at a tech gala, moments before learning that the woman he planned to propose to had sold their story to the tabloids in exchange for a lucrative interview contract. His heart had cracked then, not physically, but painfully enough, that when he later collapsed from the first cardiac episode, the doctors had quietly agreed the emotional trauma had likely triggered it. Since then, he had survived on medication and ritualistic control, living as if every minute needed to be rationed. At night, the door he had held closed for years finally gave way. He clutched the edge of the desk, trying to drag himself upright. The storm rattled the windows as if urging him to stay conscious. His vision pulsed in and out like fading film. He knew enough about his heart condition to recognize the truth. If he closed his eyes now, he might never open them again. For a moment, he thought about calling emergency services, but the memory of flashbulbs reporters and headlines whispering about his health made him hesitate. Dying publicly felt worse than dying alone. The word alone echoed through the hollow rooms of the mansion. He had built Hale Manor to be a fortress, a perfect sanctuary of steel, glass, and quiet. But now, as the rain hammered against the windows, it felt more like a tomb. He reached again for the pill bottle, even though he knew it was empty. His hands trembled violently, and he slammed his fist weakly against the floor in frustration. He whispered, "Not yet," through a clenched jaw. Then his body slumped sideways. Darkness crept in, from the edges of his vision thick and heavy. His breathing came in short, broken bursts. He did not hear the car approaching outside. He did not hear footsteps climbing the stone stairs to the front door. But he heard the knock, a soft, uncertain knock that snapped through the suffocating silence like a spark. Ethan forced his eyes open, half expecting he had imagined it. But then came another knock, louder, this time followed by a shaky voice on the intercom. "Hello, I know it is late, I am sorry, but I am here for the housekeeping shift interview." His brows pulled together. Interview at midnight. That was impossible. He had canceled every hiring appointment weeks ago. But then he remembered. His assistant had insisted on scheduling a last-minute candidate for the night shift, a desperate attempt to help him maintain some structure in his collapsing life. Ethan had ignored it. Now the timing felt like cruel irony. Another knock sounded. "Please, it is raining, and I do not know if I am at the right place. Could you please just let me confirm?" The voice was young, steady, but anxious. Ethan groaned, trying to sit up. Pain shot down his left arm, but he dragged himself forward inch by inch until he reached the small remote embedded in the floor. He pressed the button and the front door unlocked with a soft mechanical click. Rain swept in as the door opened, revealing a young woman standing on the threshold drenched from head to toe. Her hair clung to her cheeks, dripping in thin streams onto her simple uniform. Her shoes were soaked through. She clutched a cheap plastic folder to her chest as if it contained her whole life. When she stepped inside, her breath caught at the sight of the massive marble foyer, lit only by emergency lights and the faint glow of distant lightning. She whispered in awe, "Hail Manor." Just as she did, Ethan's vision blurred again. His head hit the floor with a dull thud he could barely feel. The woman's startled eyes widening as she noticed a faint light from the study and rushed toward it. When she reached the doorway, she froze. Ethan Hale, the man whose face had once appeared on magazine covers and financial journals, lay collapsed on the floor, pale and gasping. She dropped her folder and ran to him. Sir, can you hear me?" She reached for her phone, but he gripped her wrist with surprising strength. "Do not call anyone," he rasped. Her breath trembled. "Sir, you need help. Let me call someone. You are having an episode." "No emergency services," he insisted. "No cameras, no press." She stared at him, horrified and torn. He tightened his grip. "Please." Something in his voice broke through her hesitation. She knelt beside him, supporting his shoulders with both hands. His heartbeat fluttered rapidly against her palm like a bird trying to escape a cage. She whispered, slow, sir, breathe with me." Her voice was soft, steady, grounding. For a moment, the darkness receded. Ethan blinked slowly, taking in her face for the first time. She had wide, earnest eyes and rain-slicked lashes. Her breath trembled, but she did not look away. He forced out the words that clawed at his throat. "From tonight on, you stay." She swallowed. "Sir, what are you talking about?" He inhaled sharply, chest spasming. "You stay every night." "Until dawn." Her lips parted in shock, but before she could ask why, he added with the last thread of strength he had left, "I cannot die alone." Her eyes softened just slightly in recognition of a pain too familiar. She nodded once, barely, but enough. He closed his eyes again, and this time the darkness felt less suffocating. She held him steady, whispering, "It is all right," breathing with him until his heartbeat steadied just enough to keep him conscious. Outside the storm raged, but inside something shifted. Not healing, not yet, but the first breath before the door of his life opened again. The storm had softened into a steady whisper by the time Ethan managed to sit upright with the young woman's help. His breath still came in uneven fragments, but the sharp edge of panic had eased under her steady presence. She knelt beside him, soaked uniform clinging to her frame, but her hands never trembled when she steadied him. She asked quietly, "Sir, can you stand?" He nodded, though it was a lie. She looped his arm around her shoulder, guiding him slowly toward the leather chair near the fireplace. Every step felt like walking through thick water, but he did not let himself break in front of a stranger. When he finally sank into the chair, the firelight cast faint gold along the edges of her wet hair. She stood in front of him, catching her breath. Her expression was careful, respectful, yet not afraid. "What is your name?" he asked, voice rough. "Lena Torres, sir," she answered. "I had an interview tonight, but I think I arrived at the wrong time." Ethan let out a faint scoff, almost a laugh. "No, you arrived exactly when you were meant to." She blinked at him, confused but didn't press. Her eyes darted to the pill bottle still on the floor. She took a silent breath, clearly torn between wanting to help and wanting to follow the boundaries he had already set. He lifted a hand, motioning her closer. Sit. She hesitated, then obeyed, settling into the chair across from him. Every drop of rainwater that fell from her hair onto the wooden floor echoed in the cavernous silence. Ethan studied her face. Young, probably mid-20s, maybe younger, determined. The kind of woman who had walked through storms her whole life and kept going. You saw me at my weakest, he said quietly. Even though we have only just met. I do not like that. She folded her hands in her lap. I am not here to judge you, sir. I just needed work. That much was clear. But Ethan saw something else too, something he had once admired in people, before he stopped letting people near him. Honesty, without glamour, without agenda. He exhaled slowly, letting the reality of his condition settle between them. My heart is failing Lena. She looked at him with an aching softness but not pity, which surprised him. I know what a cardiac episode looks like, she said. My mother has heart failure too. Ethan stiffened. That small detail explained more than he expected, that steadiness, that calm in the face of his collapse, the hesitation to call for help. She knew, she understood, which made what he was about to say feel like less of a demand and more of a plea, disguised as authority. I need you to stay every night, he said, holding her gaze. From dusk until dawn. She frowned slightly. Sir, I do not understand. I did not ask for a caregiver position. You are not, he cut in. I am not asking you to perform medical assistance. Or anything improper. She straightened a little at that, relieved but still unsure. Then what exactly do you expect me to do? He leaned back, letting shadows hide the pieces of him he could not yet reveal. You will be my presence. Her eyebrows lifted. Your presence, yes. In this house, in this silence. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not ask questions about my past, and you do not open the east wing. Ever. His tone sharpened on the last word. She felt it. The boundary carved not by anger but by pain. Ethan continued, there will be rules, strict ones. You arrive at 7 every evening, you leave at sunrise. You remain inside the house the entire night. No visitors, no calls unless you are in danger. You keep the rooms in order, you keep the house alive. She let those words settle, then asked softly, and if something happens to you while I am here, what then? He held her eyes with a frankness that startled her. If I lose consciousness, you do not call emergency services unless I give permission. Her breath caught. Sir, that is not safe, I know, but I cannot afford another headline about my health. Cameras would be here before the ambulance. The world would turn this into a spectacle. It would destroy what is left of my name. It already felt destroyed to him, but she did not need to know that. Lena tried again, voice soft but firm. Sir, I respect your privacy, but your life matters more than a headline. He let out a quiet laugh that carried no humor. That is where you are wrong. My life stopped mattering the day I stopped living. Silence fell, heavy, raw. She looked at him in a way no one had in years, not as a billionaire, not as a broken public figure, but as a man standing on the edge of something he feared too much to face alone. Why me? She whispered. Why choose a stranger? Ethan turned his face toward the window, where rain streaks caught the firelight like tiny silver scars. Because strangers leave the least permanent wounds, he murmured. And because you walked into this house without pretending to be anything more than what you are. He paused. Real. The word lingered between them. Lena exhaled a shaky breath. Her eyes dropped to her hands, twisting in her lap. I need work, she said quietly. I need to pay for my mother's medication. I cannot afford to lose another job. He nodded once, understanding more than he expected. Then stay, every night, nothing more, nothing less. The offer felt like both a lifeline and a sentence. She looked at him again, taking in his pale skin, the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his chest still rose unevenly. Finally, she whispered, "Then what do I sign?" His answer was immediate. No contract on paper, only your word. She hesitated, then nodded. You have it, sir. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, letting the strange warmth of relief wash over him. Not safety, not peace, but presence. The one thing he had been starving for without realizing it. When he opened his eyes again, Lena was still watching him with careful, quiet resolve. He stood slowly bracing himself on the arm of the chair. She rose to help him, but stopped when he lifted a hand. Do not worry. I am used to falling, he said quietly. But tonight I did not, because you knocked. Lena looked down at the floor emotion, catching in her throat. He walked past her toward the stairs, speaking without turning. 7 p.m. tomorrow. Do not be late. She nodded, gathering her soaked folder from the floor. The storm outside had mellowed into a gentle tapping as she stepped toward the door. Before she left, she glanced back into the vast, dim mansion. It felt cold, hollow, starved, but not entirely dead. Something about the way he had whispered stay lingered in the air. As she stepped into the rain, she whispered to herself one night at a time. Inside, Ethan pressed a hand to his chest, not from pain, but from something far more dangerous: hope. The next evening arrived with a sky the color of steel and a thin mist curling over Lake Union like breath on glass. Hale Manor stood motionless against the fading light, a monument carved from grief and long silences. At exactly 7 p.m. Lena stepped through the gates, her steps cautious but steady. Her jacket zipped tightly against the cold. She carried her small cleaning bag and a folded sketchbook in her arms. Though she would never admit, she brought the sketchbook for comfort. When she reached the door, it opened automatically, as if the house itself had been waiting. Inside, the lights were low, warm golden shadows, stretching long across the marble floor. Ethan was seated in the great room in a leather armchair facing the floor-to-ceiling windows. He did not turn when she entered, but he spoke quietly enough that she knew the words were meant only for her. You are on time. She nodded, unsure if he wanted a verbal response. He did not look away from the storm clouds gathering outside. For tonight, he said, your duties are simple. Clean if you wish, or sit if you must. The silence is heavier after dark. Lena set her bag down and approached slowly, hands clasped behind her back. She noticed for the first time the objects that filled the room. Awards from the early days of his career, framed magazine covers with headlines praising his genius, photographs of him shaking hands with influential figures, but none of it matched the expression on his face. He looked like a man watching the world from the outside, unwilling to enter. She hesitated, then asked softly, Sir, would you like tea? No, thank you, he replied. Tea is for people who still expect warmth. She didn't fully understand, but she sensed his words were less about tea and more about life and the ways it had abandoned him. She moved quietly through the room, dusting shelves, straightening books, organizing the space, while he remained unmoving facing the window. After several minutes, she paused, glancing toward him. If he had been a statue, she would not have been surprised. He sat with a stillness that felt unnatural, like he had trained himself to freeze the very air around him. When she finally gathered the courage, she asked Sir May, "I ask you something." He did not turn. "You may ask. You do not need an answer." She considered the warning, but her voice came anyway, careful, steady. "Why do you refuse help?" When his eyes shifted slightly toward her, she regretted asking, but he did not lash out. Instead, his gaze drifted back to the window and he said, "Because help comes with expectations. Expectations come with betrayal, and betrayal comes with headlines." The room felt colder suddenly. She lowered her eyes and resumed cleaning, but the question lingered heavy between them. After a long silence, Ethan spoke again, voice quieter, as if the words were coming from far away. "I stopped living when I was 29. She froze. It was the first personal sentence he had offered her. She stayed still, afraid that moving would make him retreat again. Ethan continued without looking at her. "You have seen the awards, the articles, the achievements. All of them happened before that age. People think I became a ghost because of my heart condition. That is only part of it." "What happened at 29? She asked softly. He exhaled a long, slow breath, the kind that slipped through cracks of memories, too painful to revisit, yet too haunting to ignore. He rubbed his thumb against his palm in small circles, a nervous habit he did not seem aware of. "At 29, he said I was engaged to a woman named Camille Rhodes. She was brilliant, charming, and she knew exactly how to fit into the life I was building. The media adored her. Investors trusted her. My board called her my greatest asset. Even my parents embraced her like a daughter long before we were married." Lena stayed silent, letting him continue. "I thought she loved me. I planned to propose during a charity gala. The ring was in my pocket. The photographer was waiting. Everything was arranged." His voice tightened, but he did not stop. "Hours before the gala, Camille sold our entire story to a media outlet. She told them every intimate detail of our relationship in exchange for a contract worth over $1 million. Lena's breath hitched. "That is cruel." "Cruel," he repeated softly. "Yes, but not as cruel as what followed. The media framed me as the heartless billionaire who refused to marry her because she leaked the story. The public believed I humiliated her. Her interview cast me as cold, calculating, and emotionally unavailable. People devoured it. It was easier than believing their darling Camille was the one who shattered the trust." His jaw clenched. The attacks did not end there. "An old rival leaked false allegations that I mistreated her emotionally. Reporters swarmed my home. Investors panicked. My board questioned my mental state. One headline said I demanded control over everyone around me." He paused. "Ironic considering our situation, now is it not?" She looked up startled, but he did not meet her gaze. "The night I confronted Camille, she did not deny what she had done. She insisted it was for my own good because it made her a public figure that would strengthen my company." He laughed bitterly. "She said we were a brand, not people, not love, a brand." Then he whispered the words that had frozen inside him for years. "I collapsed before I could finish the argument, my first major heart episode. My doctors said stress triggered it. They said I was lucky to have survived. I did not feel lucky." Lena felt the sting behind her eyes but blinked it away. He finally turned toward her. His face was calm, but the sadness in his eyes was raw and unguarded. "I learned something that night," he said softly. People cannot break your heart unless you give it to them. So I stopped giving it. I stopped giving anything. I stopped living. The confession hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Lena stepped closer, drawn by something deeper than obligation. "Sir," she whispered gently, "you hired me to fill silence, not to stand in it. You do not have to face all of it alone." He looked at her carefully, as if evaluating whether her words carried truth or simply sympathy. After a long moment, he asked, "And what do you know about not being able to live?" Lena swallowed, thinking of her mother lying in a hospital bed and the endless debt that clawed at their lives. "More than you think," she whispered. Something in his expression softened. For the first time, there was no wall between them, only two damaged lives touching at the edges. He turned back to the window, but his voice was gentler than before. "You may stay in the living room tonight," he said. "It is closer." She nodded. "Thank you, sir." As she arranged her small things in the corner, she glanced at him once more. Ethan sat perfectly still, staring into the darkening world outside. A man breathing, but not living. Not yet. The first night Lena stayed in Hale Manor felt unlike anything she had ever experienced. Outside, the rain softened into a thin mist, but inside the house the silence thickened as if the walls themselves held their breath. She moved quietly through the living room, arranging a small cotton blanket she had brought from home, placing her bag near the corner where the fireplace cast its faint glow. Ethan remained in the great room, sitting rigidly in the leather armchair, as though afraid any movement might break whatever fragile truce existed between them. The fire crackled softly, throwing amber light across the floor. Eventually, he spoke without looking up. "Sit. Not there. Here." He gestured faintly toward the chair across from him, the same one she had occupied the night before. It felt more like a place being offered than a command. She obeyed, folding her hands in her lap. Neither of them spoke at first. The quiet between them was not empty, but steeped in something unspoken, an unease that felt strangely comforting. Ethan's eyes were fixed on the window, though he was not really seeing anything outside. The city lights reflected in the glass like distant stars, but his gaze was somewhere deeper, far away. After several minutes, he finally said, "You are humming again." Her eyes widened. "I am sorry, sir. I did not notice." He shook his head slowly. "Do not apologize. It is just unfamiliar to hear a sound in this house that does not echo." She offered a small, hesitant smile. "My mother used to say, humming keeps the spirit warm." Ethan's lips twitched, as though something in him wanted to remember how to smile. "I have not felt warm in a long time," he murmured. The fire crackled again, filling the quiet. She watched him cautiously, noticing the faint tremor in his right hand, the way he pressed his thumb against his palm, as if trying to measure the rhythm of his own pulse. "Sir," she said softly, "are you in pain?" His gaze flicked to her briefly, then away. "Pain is a constant. I ignore it." Her brows tightened. "You do not have to ignore it." He breathed out slowly. "Yes, I do." They fell into silence again, but it felt different now. Something loosened between them, like a knot coming undone. After a moment, Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His voice was softer. "Tell me something," he said, "something alive." She blinked, surprised. "About what? Anything. Something that reminds you that life still moves forward, even when you feel stuck." Her throat tightened. It was not a usual request, not from a boss, not from a billionaire, not from a man who had collapsed hours earlier. She exhaled slowly, thinking. Finally she spoke. When I was a kid, we lived in a small apartment above a bakery, she said. Every morning at 5, they started mixing dough, and the whole building smelled like warm sugar and yeast. My mother would wake up from that smell alone. She said it reminded her that even on the worst day, something sweet could rise. Ethan's eyes closed for a moment, absorbing the image. When he opened them again, they were calmer. And now he asked, "What wakes you?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Worry." His expression flickered. "About what, my mother? The bills? Losing this job?" And her voice faltered. "And the fear that nothing I do ever leads anywhere." Ethan watched her quietly. "You are young," he said. "You have time." She let out a hollow laugh. "Time is expensive, sir, and I have very little of it these days." Something in her words hit him harder than he expected. He leaned back, staring into the fire. "I remember when time felt expensive," he said, "before everything froze." She lowered her gaze, giving him space. After a long pause, he spoke again, quietly, almost reluctantly. "Do you paint still?" Her head snapped up, startled. He had remembered something from their first conversation. "Not recently," she admitted. "It feels like a luxury." He nodded slowly. "Art always is." But he pressed his fingertips together, as if thinking, "You should not stop doing the one thing that connects you to yourself." She studied him for a moment, mesmerized by how his voice changed when he talked about anything other than his own pain. Softer, human, alive. She whispered softly, "What about you, sir? What connects you to yourself now?" Ethan's jaw tightened. Nothing. The word dropped heavy between them. She looked at him a long time, then said quietly, "Maybe that is why you need someone here at night." He lifted his eyes to her. "Not to save you," she clarified, "but to witness you. Sometimes being seen keeps us alive, even when living feels impossible." His breath hitched ever so slightly. He did not respond. The fire's glow flickered across the room, making the shadows dance, and for once the silence did not feel crushing. Instead, it felt like a blanket laid gently over two people, sitting closer in spirit than they appeared. After several moments, Ethan finally said, "You do not have to stay awake the entire night. You can rest in the living room." She nodded. "Thank you." But as she stood, he added quietly, "Do not go too far." She froze, looking back at him. His eyes were fixed on the flames, but his voice carried a tremor of vulnerability. "The nights are the worst." His honesty startled her. She softened, stepped closer. "I will be right here, sir." She placed her blanket on the small couch near the fireplace, settling in. Ethan remained in his chair, watching the fire with unfocused eyes. Hours passed. She drifted in and out of light sleep, waking occasionally to the sound of his uneven breaths, or the subtle rustle of him shifting in his seat. At one point, she opened her eyes to find him watching the fire with an expression she couldn't name. Not grief, not fear, something in between. She whispered softly, "Ethan." He turned, startled by the sound of his own name coming from her mouth. She continued, "It is all right. I am here." His shoulders eased just enough for her to see it. For the first time since 29, Ethan Hale did not face the night alone. The fifth night unfolded with a heaviness that neither of them could name, but both could feel. The air inside Hale Manor was colder than usual, as though the house sensed something approaching long before either of them did. Outside, the wind dragged across the windows in long, low groans, brushing the glass with restless fingers. Lena arrived precisely at 7, as always, setting her jacket on the chair by the door and placing her small bag near the fireplace. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. The absence unsettled her. He was always in the great room at this hour, always in the chair by the window, always sitting with his breath caught somewhere between then and now. "Sir," she called softly. "Are you here?" No answer. The silence pressed against her skin, cold and unnerving. She walked deeper into the house, checking each room with cautious steps. Her heart hammered as she opened the door to the library, but found only dust motes drifting in the amber lamplight. She checked the dining hall, the hallway, the study. Nothing. The dread began to coil tight around her ribs. When she reached the East Wing corridor, she stopped instinctively. His rule: never open the East Wing, never cross that threshold. But the house felt wrong tonight, too quiet, too hollow, too still. Against her better judgment, she whispered, "Sir, please answer me." Her voice wavered, swallowed by the dark. She forced herself to turn back, retracing her steps. If anything had happened, if he had collapsed somewhere in the house, she would never forgive herself. She reached the staircase and froze. A faint sound drifted from upstairs. Not a voice, not a fall. Something in between, like a breath struggling to find its way back to life. She rushed up the stairs, 2 at a time, her chest tight, her throat dry. When she reached the 2nd floor, the sound came again, soft and fractured. She followed it down the dim hallway, her hand trembling as she pushed open a half-closed door. What she saw inside wrenched the breath out of her lungs. Ethan lay on the hardwood floor, his body twisted slightly to one side, as if he had crumpled mid-step. His hand was pressed weakly against his chest, his breaths coming in short, erratic gasps. The pill bottle rolled beside him empty. "Oh God, Ethan." She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands hovering above him, unsure where to touch first. His eyes flickered open, unfocused, filled with a pain she had never seen in another human being. "Lena," he rasped voice, dragged raw across the air. She swallowed hard, fighting panic. "Sir, you need help. Tell me to call someone, please." She begged, but he shook his head, barely able to move. No cameras, no headlines. His voice cracked into a cough. No more spectacle. Lena pressed a hand to his shoulder, steadying him. "This is not about headlines. This is your life." But he shook his head again, more fiercely, though the effort nearly knocked the breath from him. His fingers clawed weakly at the floor as he tried to push himself up, but his body betrayed him, collapsing again. She grabbed his arm gently, carefully. "Do not move. You will make it worse." He let out a dry breath that sounded like a broken laugh. Worse already. A wave of dizziness washed over him. She could see it, the way his pupils reacted slowly, the way his skin turned a pale gray at the edges, the way his lips trembled. She tried again, voice trembling. "Ethan, let me call someone. Please, tell me to." His eyes opened just enough to meet hers. The desperation there was not pride, but fear of something different. Fear of losing control of his narrative, of being humiliated again, of the world watching him break. But he did not say no this time. Instead, he whispered, barely audible, "Stay." Her breath hitched. "I am here," she whispered back, "but you have to let me help." His hand twitched weakly toward her shirt, gripping the fabric like a lifeline. "Do not leave, not tonight." His breaths shortened, sharp and frightening. Lena pressed her free hand against his cheek, turning his face gently toward her. "Ethan, look at me," she said, trying to steady her voice. "Focus on my voice. Stay with me." His lips parted, but no sound came, only a thin thread of breath. She memorized every detail of his face in that instant, the vulnerability, the terror, the stubbornness, the deep, aching loneliness. Then his body jerked once violently. His eyes rolled to the side. His chest stilled. Ethan, Ethan. She pressed her hand to his sternum, feeling nothing, no rise, no rhythm, no life. The world narrowed into a single deafening silence. Then she felt it, the faintest tremor beneath her palm, a flutter like a bird trapped under ice. One heartbeat, then none, then another, then nothing at all. No, 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 Ethan, please. She lifted his head gently onto her lap, her fingers trembling. She knew what cardiac arrest looked like. She had watched her mother collapse twice. She had held her mother through the dark, wait for paramedics. She knew the signs too well. She leaned down, pressing her cheek near his mouth. No breath. She pressed her ear against his chest. No rhythm. She swallowed a sob. "I am calling for help," she whispered, though he could not hear her. She grabbed her phone, but her fingers froze inches from the screen. Rules, his rules, the humiliation he feared, the headlines, the cameras, the world waiting to devour his collapse. She closed her eyes for a single tortured moment. Then she dialed anyway. The dispatcher answered. 911, what is your emergency? My employer collapsed, she said, voice shaking, heart failure history, no pulse, no breathing. The dispatcher gave instructions, but Lena was already moving, positioning herself over him, beginning compressions, counting under her breath, staying calm because panic would not save him. At 30 compressions, she checked again. Still no breath, still no pulse. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept going, kept counting, kept pushing, kept fighting for the man who had asked her to stay because the silence was killing him faster than the disease. At the 12th second, something shifted. A shallow gasp broke through his lips, faint but there. Then another barely perceptible. His eyelids fluttered like he was dragging himself back from a cliff. Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes opened, halfway glazed but alive. Paramedics burst into the room, lights flashing red against the walls. They lifted him, carefully moving with practiced urgency, attaching monitors, oxygen stabilizing him as much as they could. One paramedic spoke into his radio. The patient regained pulse after 12 seconds. Transporting now. They loaded Ethan onto the stretcher. His hand slipped off the side until Lena caught it, instinctively intertwining her fingers with his. His eyes found hers through the fog of pain. His lips moved. She leaned close. "Why?" she whispered. "What is it?" He breathed the smallest whisper. "I demanded you stay, because the silence was killing me faster than the disease." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I am not leaving," she whispered. "Not tonight, not ever." The doors of the ambulance closed, and the siren wailed into the night, carrying them both into the unknown. The hospital room was too white, too bright, far brighter than anything Ethan Hale ever allowed into his world. The sterile fluorescent ceiling lights hummed in a cold mechanical rhythm, a sharp contrast to the soft glow of the fireplace she had watched him sit beside night after night. Lena stood quietly beside his bed, arms wrapped around herself. Her clothes still smelled faintly of the rain from the night before, though she had changed into clean scrubs the nurses offered. Ethan lay motionless beneath the pale blue hospital blanket, monitors tracing his heartbeat in soft beeping pulses. Stable, the doctors said. Touch and go for a while, but stable now. They had found evidence of severe arrhythmia compounded by stress exhaustion and chronic heart failure. It was a miracle he survived the collapse, and even more of a miracle that Lena had been there to start compressions immediately. She stared at him, listening to the beeps. They were steady, predictable, so unlike the erratic, uneven breaths he had taken in that vast, empty manor. A nurse approached clipboard in hand, smiling gently. "You must be Lena." He kept saying your name, even when he was half-conscious. She flushed, eyes widening. Was he confused? The nurse shook her head. No, he seemed anchored by it. People who are dying often cling to the last person who felt real to them. Real. The same word he had used when hiring her. The nurse left quietly, leaving Lena in the small, sterile room filled with the faint scent of antiseptic and the sound of life measured by machines. Hours passed. She sat by his bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. Her mind returned again and again to the moment he came back from the dark, the faint gasp that shattered the silence, the way his fingers curled around hers, as if holding on to the last thread connecting him to the world. By noon the next day, Ethan finally stirred. His eyes opened slowly, heavy with medication and exhaustion. She leaned in instantly. "Ethan." His gaze flickered, struggling to focus. When it finally landed on her, he let out a weak breath that was almost a word. "You stayed." "Yes," she whispered, trembling slightly. "I stayed." He looked at her hand, which rested near his. He reached out slowly, fingertips brushing hers. "Thank you." She shook her head. "You do not have to thank me. I am just doing my job." He gave a faint, tired laugh. "That is not part of your job description." She looked down, uncertain, but deeply moved. Before she could respond, the door swung open, and the doctor entered briskly, holding a tablet. "Good to see you awake, Mr. Hale. Let's talk about your recovery and what comes next." Recovery. The word hung heavily in the room. After the doctor finished explaining treatment plans, medication adjustments, and the strong recommendation for surgery, Ethan dismissed him with a nod. The room settled into silence again. Lena hesitated before speaking. "They said you need sunlight, walks, normal routines, a little brightness." He stiffened instantly, jaw-locking eyes turning hollow. No sunlight, no morning light, not from the east. She blinked, confused. Why he closed his eyes, refusing to answer. The next day they discharged him with strict orders to avoid stress. Lena drove him home in his sleek black car hands, gripping the wheel tightly as the Seattle skyline blurred past. Ethan sat in silence, staring out the window, but not seeing anything. Hale Manor appeared at the top of the hill, as solemn as ever, the storm clouds parting slightly, allowing thin, pale light to slip through. As Lena guided him inside, she noticed how much weaker he was now, how carefully he walked, how his breaths were shallower than before. Once inside, he leaned against the wall, briefly steadying himself. She reached out instinctively to support him, and he let her. It felt new, different, as though the collapse had stripped away some of the armor he had spent years building. They reached the great room. It was dim as always, the curtains drawn tightly across every window. "Sir," she said gently, "would you like some water?" He nodded. She left for the kitchen, returning a moment later with a glass. When he took it, his hand trembled. She pretended not to notice. After he drank a few sips, he closed his eyes and whispered, "I need to sit." She helped him to the armchair near the fireplace. As he settled, she noticed again the heavy curtains covering the eastern window. They were thick, embroidered, and ancient. She hesitated, watching him breathe. His eyes were closed now, his chest rising and falling with uneven rhythm. Maybe sunlight would help him. Maybe it would warm the cold edges of this house. Maybe it would remind him that life was not just shadows and pain and memories frozen in time. Maybe sunlight was exactly what he needed. She took a small, shaky breath and stepped toward the window. Slowly, she slipped her fingers under the curtain and pulled it open. Light burst into the room. A bright golden ray poured across the floor, across the walls, across him. He gasped violently as if struck physically. Ethan's eyes snapped open, wide pupils contracting painfully. No. The word came out hoarse, sharp, full of panic. He lurched forward, grabbing the armrest, his breath fractured. "Sir, I am sorry. I just thought you needed light." He shook his head desperately, chest heaving. He pressed a hand to his sternum, breathing erratically, the rhythm stuttering like a failing engine. Turn it back now." His voice broke. She rushed to the window, pulling the curtain closed, immediately plunging the room back into dimness. Ethan bent forward, both hands braced on his knees, trembling violently. Pain twisted across his face, raw and deep, not just physical, but emotional. She fell to her knees in front of him, terrified. "Ethan, talk to me. Please tell me what hurts." He choked out a breath, struggling to speak. "Not the light itself," he whispered. "The memory. The day everything shattered. The day she—" He reached for the small frame on the side table, the one always turned away from the room. But in his panic, it fell to the floor. Glass shattered, scattering across the wood. Lena reached out, instinctively flipping the photo upright. Her breath caught. It was the East Wing balcony bathed in sunlight. And in the center, Camille Rhodes was kissing another man. The timestamp in the corner showed the exact minute Ethan had gone to propose. Lena covered her mouth. "Oh God, Ethan," she whispered, horrified. He turned his face away, but she could see the anguish tearing through him. "I saw it in sunlight," he said, voice breaking. "Every headline, every betrayal, every lie. The world brightened that day, and everything I loved darkened." She set the photo down, gently, turning her focus to him. He looked shattered, more broken than when she had found him on the floor. She reached forward, placing a trembling hand on his arm. "You are not alone, Ethan. Not anymore." He exhaled a fragile breath, leaning back into the chair, eyes closing again. The panic slowly faded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. The room returned to silence, but it was different now, filled not with emptiness, but with truth sharp and painful. The secret he had buried under layers of darkness was finally in the open. After a long, quiet moment, he whispered, barely audible, "Do not open that curtain again." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I will not." She stayed kneeling beside him until his breathing steadied. Listening to each fragile heartbeat, forbidden sunlight had revealed more than he wanted. But maybe Lena thought maybe it was the first step toward finally healing. Night settled over Hale Manor like a heavy velvet curtain, swallowing every sound and softening every edge. The house had always felt quiet, but tonight the quiet had a different weight to it, one shaped by truths dragged out of darkness and into the trembling space between two people who had nowhere left to hide. Lena moved carefully through the great room, placing the shattered photo frame on the table and sweeping the glass fragments into a small dustpan. Ethan sat in the armchair, still recovering from the panic that had seized him hours earlier, his breath steadier now, but his eyes holding a dull, unfocused ache. When she returned from the kitchen with a cup of warm water, he looked up at her with a fragile thankfulness that made her chest ache. "You should not have seen that," he said quietly, staring at the wall, not at her. She set the cup down beside him. "Maybe I needed to. You keep everything pressed so tightly inside yourself that you barely breathe. Someone has to see the wounds before they can heal." Ethan let out a brittle laugh. The last person who saw my wounds used them to destroy me. She sat across from him, folding her hands gently in her lap. I am not Camille. He looked at her then sharply, as if he needed to read her soul to believe it. His pain still flickered beneath the surface, pulsing like an old bruise that had never faded. After a long pause, he asked softly, "Then who are you, Lena Torres?" She straightened slightly, taken aback by the intensity of his question. "Who am I?" she repeated more to herself than to him. She exhaled slowly, gathering the truth she rarely shared with anyone. "I am someone who has lived most of her life trying to hold together things that were already falling apart." She began, voice steady, despite the tremor in her chest. "My father left when I was 8. My mother worked 2 jobs to feed us, and one day she collapsed at work because she did not have health insurance. I spent the next 10 years trying to keep her alive long enough to see one holiday without fear." Ethan's expression softened the ghosts in his eyes, momentarily quieting. She continued, "I clean houses because the pay is steady, not because I love it. I take care of people who forget to take care of themselves. And I push aside everything I want because wanting things never made them happen." He stared at her, absorbing every word. "And why did you take this job?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, lips parting. "Money," she said honestly. "The hospital bills pile up faster than I can count. I needed the night shifts. I needed something consistent. I needed something that paid enough to keep my mother breathing." His jaw clenched subtly, not out of anger but out of some deeper internal conflict. "You thought I was just another wealthy man who needed someone to clean his floors." She shook her head. "No, I thought you were someone drowning and pretending not to be." Ethan blinked once slowly. The room exhaled with him. He leaned back, hands resting weakly on the armrests, the faint tremor still there. "You should not have stayed," he murmured. "I demanded something unfair from you, something no employer should ask." She shook her head again, more firmly this time. "You did not demand anything from me that I could not give. You asked for presence, not servitude. You asked not to be alone." She swallowed the knot tightening in her throat. "And I understand that more than you think." His breath caught the vulnerability, raw enough to slice through the darkness. "Do you regret staying?" he whispered. "No." She answered instantly. Her voice surprised him, surprised her, surprised the silence. She continued softer. "I regret that you think you need rules to keep someone by your side." Ethan looked down at his hands. They had once signed contracts worth millions, shaped corporations, shifted markets. But now they trembled, simply holding themselves together. "Rules are easier than trust," he said. "Rules do not betray you." She leaned forward gently. "But they also do not heal you." He looked up at her, then really looked the firelight, casting soft golden shadows across his tired face. "Tell me something," he said, voice low. "If you could leave tonight, if you could walk out that door and never come back, would you?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She thought of the money she needed, the exhaustion that wrapped around her life, the fear of losing the one job that offered a fragile thread of stability. But she also thought of him, the man who watched the night like it was both a prison and a companion, the man who pretended not to need anything until his heart betrayed him. She whispered softly, "I do not know how to walk away from someone who is still fighting to stay alive." For a moment, Ethan looked as though she had cracked something open inside him, not painfully but truthfully. He looked away quickly, swallowing hard. silence stretched, tender and raw. Then in a voice barely audible, he said something he had never admitted to anyone. "I was not afraid of dying the night you found me." She felt a chill ripple across her skin. He continued, "I was afraid of dying alone." Her breath trembled. "You are not alone, Ethan. Not anymore." He turned toward her slowly, his eyes reflecting the dim firelight like distant embers. "Then tell me, Lena," he whispered, "why do you stay?" His vulnerability cut through her. She answered quietly, "Because no one should be alone in a house that large, with a heart that tired." He inhaled a shaky breath. The fire crackled, filling the silence with warmth neither of them could create on their own. After a long pause, he lifted his hand, reaching toward her hesitantly, as though expecting her to pull away. But she didn't. Their fingers brushed and held. It was not romantic, not yet, not fragile enough to shatter. It was something deeper, two people touching the truth. Ethan closed his eyes, whispering, "Thank you." She squeezed his hand gently. "You do not have to thank me for being human." That night they stayed awake longer than either intended, talking quietly, trading truths, and unraveling years of silence. And somewhere between confession and understanding, between the flicker of the fireplace and the timid brush of fingers, Ethan's heart did not feel so alone. Morning crept into Hale Manor with a muted grayness that felt neither welcoming nor hostile, simply watchful, as if the house itself sensed that something was about to shift beneath its foundations. Lena arrived early for the first time, her footsteps soft against the polished floor, her breath a small cloud in the cool air. Ethan was in the great room, dressed in a charcoal sweater, sitting straighter than usual, a faint strength returning to his posture. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You are early," he murmured. She shrugged gently. "I did not want you waking up alone." His gaze flickered away quickly, as though the sincerity in her words was too much to hold. He was about to speak when his phone vibrated sharply on the table. The sound sliced through the quiet. Ethan glanced at the screen. His jaw tightened. He answered reluctantly, "Hale." A voice crackled through the speaker, loud enough for Lena to catch fragments. "Mr. Hale, this is Attorney Kellerman. There is an urgent matter regarding your emergency will." Ethan stiffened. "My what?" The attorney continued rapidly. "Due to your recent hospitalization, the interim version filed 12 months ago has been activated for review. We need your signature to confirm or update its clauses. Otherwise, the current terms will go into effect in 60 days. Ethan's brows knit in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "There are no unusual clauses. That will was never meant to take effect," Sir Kellerman said carefully, voice tightening. "There is one clause that stands out. You designated your primary nighttime caregiver as the beneficiary to $20 million in the event of your passing." The world stilled. Ethan shot to his feet, unsteady but fueled by shock. "What caregiver? I have never named any caregiver." Kellerman continued, "There is a name listed, sir, under the clause for essential presence during medical vulnerability. The beneficiary is Lena Torres." Lena froze. Her breath evaporated. The phone slipped slightly in Ethan's hand, but he held it tighter, his voice turning sharp enough to cut glass. "That is impossible. I never wrote that. I never authorized such a clause." Kellerman sighed. "Then someone altered the document. Without your knowledge, we are investigating. But you need to understand, this will be public record if not amended." Public. The word sent a chill through the room. The world already loved tearing Ethan apart. This would be gasoline on the last fragile piece of his reputation. Kellerman added, and Mr. Hale, considering your recent health crisis, the media will attack the girl. Hard. Ethan went silent, the kind of silence that screamed. Lena stepped back instinctively, heart pounding. Ethan ended the call with a clipped, "I will be there within the hour." He lowered the phone slowly, turning to her with a look she couldn't decipher. Equal parts disbelief, confusion, and something darker. She swallowed. "Sir, I did not know about any of that. I would never." His voice cut through hers, not angry but shaken. "I know you would not write it," he said softly, "but someone did, and they used your name." His hand went to his chest, as if the weight of this betrayal was another blow to his already fragile heart. Lena stepped closer. Ethan, who would want to do this? He closed his eyes for a long moment, the pain in his expression growing sharper. Someone who wanted to destroy both of us. His voice was barely audible. Someone who wanted to make it look like you were waiting for me to die. The words hit her like a slap. She staggered slightly, clutching the back of a chair. No, sir, people cannot believe that. They would never think I. He met her eyes with a look filled with sorrow. They will. They always do. Before she could respond, Ethan's phone chimed repeatedly. Notifications exploding like grenades. He ignored them until one preview caught his eye. Breaking billionaire Ethan Hale. Names young Maid as $20 million beneficiary. Public suspects, secret affair exploitation. Lena felt her knees weaken. "This cannot be real," she whispered. "This is a lie." Ethan moved toward her slowly, carefully, like approaching someone standing on an emotional cliff. "Lena, I need you to listen. Someone leaked the amended clause before I even saw it. Someone wants to ruin your name and what little is left of mine." She blinked, tears burning her eyes. "Why me? Why involve me?" His voice tightened. "Because you are near me. Because you care. Because you stayed." Reporters were already posting theories, social media, catching fire within minutes. Strangers calling her a gold digger, a manipulator, a parasite waiting for a dying billionaire to leave her fortune. The accusations sliced into her. "Sir, what do we do?" Ethan took a shaky breath. "I go to my attorney. I fight this. I clear your name and mine. You stay here where it is safe." She shook her head, trembling. "Safe where, sir? In a house the world is ready to burn down around me." Ethan's breath cracked. He reached out as if to steady her, but she stepped back, overwhelmed. The world was turning too fast, too loud, too cruel. Her voice broke. "I cannot have people think that I am feeding off your illness. I cannot have people think that I am waiting for you till she couldn't say the word. Die." Ethan finished it for her voice hollow. Lena closed her eyes, tears spilling. "Please believe me," she whispered. "I am not here for money. I am not here for anything except—" She stopped herself before the truth slipped out. Ethan looked at her with a grief so deep it nearly dropped him. "I know," he said softly, "and that is exactly why this hurts more." They both fell silent, the world inside the manor, collapsing without a single sound. Then Ethan whispered words he wished he didn't have to say. "Maybe you should leave for a few days." Her breath shattered. Leave felt like exile, felt like being cast aside, felt like being blamed for a crime she did not commit. But she nodded slowly, because the alternative was to ruin him further. "If I leave," she whispered, "I do not know if I can come back." Ethan swallowed hard pain, twisting through his eyes. "I know." She gathered her bag quietly. her heart breaking under the weight of accusations she had never imagined. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. Ethan looked like a man losing more than just a companion. He looked like someone losing the one person who had kept his nights breathing. She whispered, voice fragile, "I stayed because you asked me to. I am leaving because you didn't." His eyes closed in agony. Lena stepped into the rain, disappearing into the gray. Hale Manor stood behind her, silent and wounded. And for the first time since 29, Ethan Hale felt the crushing weight of losing someone who had never wanted anything from him but the truth. The first day without Lena felt like a hole had opened in the walls of Hale Manor, letting the cold pour in unchecked. Ethan spent the morning at his attorney's office, signing documents, filing disputes, reviewing security footage that proved nothing, and listening to Kellerman repeat the same phrase over and over. "We will fight this, sir, but the damage is already done." Headlines multiplied like fractures across glass. Social feeds speculated with wild, hungry certainty that the Maid had seduced the dying billionaire for a payout. Others insisted Ethan was manipulating her. No one told the truth because the truth had no spectacle. By nighttime, Ethan returned to an empty house, the silence louder than ever. He sat in the armchair where she had once hummed without realizing and whispered into the dark, "I should not have let you leave." But he did, and now the night stretched endlessly, without her voice softening the edges. Day 3 arrived with paparazzi parked outside the gates, shouting questions. Ethan ignored them. He moved from room to room like a ghost unable to breathe, without the quiet rhythm she brought into the house. He caught himself looking toward the door every time the clock struck 7, as if she might appear anyway, despite everything. She never did. On day 5, Kellerman uncovered the source of the will amendment, a digital signature inserted from an external proxy and not traceable, but suspiciously aligned with accounts once linked to Camille Rhodes. Ethan nearly collapsed again when he heard her name. Camille always did know how to wound him without lifting a finger. But this time she was not only aiming at him. She had dragged Lena into her web. That night, Ethan opened the curtains in the great room for the first time in years, letting the moonlight spill across the floor. It hurt, but so did breathing. On day 10, he finally checked social media. The first mention he found about Lena twisted his stomach. Photos of her leaving the manor in the rain, accompanied by captions dripping with accusation. He imagined her reading them, felt his chest tighten painfully. She did not deserve any of this. The next morning he made a decision. He instructed his security team to prepare the car. He was leaving Seattle. He needed to find her. He needed to tell her the truth. But Kellerman stopped him at the gate. "Sir, the press is surrounding every exit. If you leave now, you will only fuel the fire." He froze, torn between desperation and logic. He whispered, "Then how do I fix this?" Kellerman answered carefully, "Sometimes the truth must be built, not announced." For the next week, Ethan immersed himself in work with a determination he had not shown since he was 29. He reinstated his PR team, drafted controlled statements, prepared legal counters, and authorized investigations into the data breach. But none of it mattered at night. At night, he returned to an empty house, stripped of the only presence that had made life bearable. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating regularly. He stopped opening the curtains again. On the 23rd night, he woke gasping from a half-dream, half-memory of her voice whispering, "I will be right here, sir." He sat up drenched in sweat, staring at the empty chair across from him. "You are not here," he whispered, "and I am not surviving this." On day 30, he finally learned where she had gone. A neighbor from her old apartment answered the phone. She moved to Los Angeles, said she needed a fresh start, said Seattle wasn't safe for her anymore. The words hit him harder than any collapse. Not safe. Because of him. Because he had not protected her. He ended the call with shaking hands and stared at the address scribbled on the slip of paper. Los Angeles, a city bright enough to swallow her whole. A city big enough for her to disappear. He should go there immediately. He should find her. He should apologize. He should tell her she mattered. But his heart weakened again, that week forcing him back into the hospital for observation. The doctors ordered rest, no travel, no stress. He nodded, but did not listen. On day 36, he signed himself out early against medical advice. His heart ached with every step, but the ache of losing her was worse. He called for the car ready to fly to California, but paparazzi swarmed the driveway. "Do you miss your maid, Ethan? Do you regret naming her in your will? Who is she to you? Is she your lover? Is she after your fortune?" He froze in the flashing lights, body trembling, chest tightening. The glare, the questions, the noise slammed into him like a physical blow, and he stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the car door to stay upright. His driver rushed to help, but Ethan waved him off, breath shallow. Not now, not like this. He retreated into the house, barricading himself inside the only place left that still held echoes of her presence. That night he sat in the living room, staring at the blanket she once folded neatly at the foot of the couch. He whispered into the emptiness, "Lena, I am sorry. Please come back." But she did not hear him. On day 40, he hired a private investigator. He told him only the truth. Find her. Make sure she is safe. Do not approach her. Just tell me she is alive. The PI returned 6 days later with a report. Lena Torres' current address in Los Angeles, employed part-time at a local art studio working on commissions for tourists. Appears healthy. No signs of distress. Lives modestly. Keeps to herself. Ethan closed his eyes, releasing a breath that was half relief, half heartbreak. She was alive. She was rebuilding without him. On day 50, he found the courage to walk into the East Wing for the first time in years. Dust coated everything. The balcony doors were locked exactly as he had left them. He approached the window, staring at the spot where his life had once shattered. "This is not the memory I want to die with," he whispered. He turned and left the room, closing the door gently behind him. On day 57, he collapsed again, but refused to go to the hospital this time. He lay on the couch sweating, struggling to breathe, whispering her name like a prayer. "Lena, Lena, Lena." The sound faded against the cold walls unheard. On day 60, Hale Manor was darker than ever. Ethan Hale stood at the window, staring at the horizon, hand pressed to the glass, whispering into the empty night, "I will find you, even if it is the last thing my heart ever does." The 61st day began with a heaviness sitting on Ethan's chest, the way regret sits on a man's shoulders, refusing to let him stand tall. He had not slept the night before. His heart had kept him awake with its unpredictable rhythm, thumping hard, then fading into frightening silence, then thumping again like it was deciding whether to continue or give up. He sat in the great room, staring at the empty chair where Lena had once curled her legs beneath herself, humming without realizing it. The memory clawed at him. He pressed a hand to his sternum, wincing as another uneven beat throbbed through him. He knew the doctors would demand he return to the hospital, but he could not keep waiting for a perfect moment to fix what had been broken between them. Perfect moments didn't exist, only choices, and he had made the wrong one 60 days ago. By noon, the housekeeper brought in the mail and set it gently on the table. Ethan ignored it until one envelope caught his attention. A glossy flyer, a familiar name printed at the bottom. Lena Torres, solo art display. One night only, Los Angeles Harbor Gallery. The world stilled. He picked up the flyer, lifting it with trembling fingers. Her art, her show, something she must have worked toward for years, something she would never have reached if she had stayed trapped in the shadows of Hale Manor. His chest constricted with pain and pride all at once, and he knew he had to go, even if his heart wasn't ready, even if the world wasn't, even if seeing him caused her more pain. He needed to see her one last time before the disease or the silence claimed him entirely. Within hours, he was on a private jet against every medical warning. The cabin lights felt too bright, the air too thin, but he stared at the flyer, the entire flight whispering her name under his breath like a quiet mantra. Lena. When he landed in Los Angeles, a wave of heat and city noise hit him all at once. Light traffic honked in the distance. Vendors called out on the sidewalks. Life moved differently here. Life moved forward. He clutched the handles of the rental car as he drove toward the harbor, each breath shallow, each streetlight reflecting in the windshield like sparks. The gallery was already buzzing with people when he arrived. Warm golden light spilled through the windows, silhouettes moving inside a blend of art lovers, tourists, and locals. He swallowed nerves and pain at once. His legs trembled as he stepped out of the car, but determination urged him forward. Inside the gallery, the air smelled of acrylic and citrus cleaner. Soft music floated through the room. People murmured softly as they admired the paintings lining the walls. And then he saw it. The painting hanging on the far wall, bathed in a warm spotlight. A man sitting alone in a dim room staring at a fireplace. His posture was weary but hopeful, his silhouette framed by shadows that seemed to reach for him. At the bottom of the canvas, delicate brushstrokes formed the title. Man Who Fought Silence. Ethan's breath hitched, his knees buckled slightly. The world blurred. His pulse pounded in his ears, uneven, frantic, warning him of what was coming. He reached out a hand toward the painting, not touching it, but hovering inches away. And then he heard her voice from across the room, soft, familiar, untouchably gentle. Ethan, he turned. Lena stood near the entrance, wide-eyed, frozen in disbelief. She looked different, softer, stronger. Her hair loosely tied back paint, still clinging faintly to her fingers. She wore a simple dress the color of dusk, and she was breathtaking. His chest tightened painfully, too painfully. He took a step toward her. His heart lurched. Another step. His breath shattered. The room tilted. Lena began moving toward him, but the floor shifted sideways. The lights blurred into streaks. Pain exploded through his sternum, a sharp tearing pain, dragging him downward. Lena screamed Ethan. The entire gallery turned. Cameras lifted. Phones pointed. His body collapsed in slow motion, hitting the polished floor with a sickening thud. He gasped, choking on air, but nothing came, nothing filled his lungs. Lena fell to her knees beside him, tears already streaming. Ethan, can you hear me? Stay with me, look at me, please." His eyes fluttered barely open, seeing only her face, her tears, her terror. And somehow, even in the blur of pain, She looked like the only clear thing left in the universe. She cradled his head in her hands, voice shaking so hard it broke. "Why are you here? Why did you come?" Ethan forced his lips to move, each word costing what little breath he had left. "I had to see you." His chest spasmed violently. Lena screamed for help. "Call an ambulance now," someone shouted. "He's the billionaire from Seattle," paparazzi murmured. "My God, get a picture." Lena cupped his face, blocking the cameras from seeing him. Her entire body shielded around his broken, failing one. "Stay with me, Ethan," she begged. "Stay, stay, stay." But his heartbeat faltered on the monitors someone had attached, pounding, then fading, pounding, then disappearing into long, terrifying pauses. He reached up weakly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You kept me alive." Lena shook her head, sobbing. "No, you kept yourself alive. I just witnessed it." His gaze softened. "You stayed." She grabbed his hand, pressing it to her chest. "I am right here, right here." The paramedics arrived, rushing through the crowd, attaching monitors, lifting him onto a stretcher. But Ethan's eyes never left Lena's, not until the doors closed, cutting her from view. As they carried him into the ambulance, he whispered her name like a final breath, "Lena," and the city lights swallowed the siren's scream as the world braced itself for the fight to keep him alive. Los Angeles General felt colder than Seattle ever had. The hallways buzzed with fluorescent lights and clipped voices, but all Lena could hear was the frantic echo of Ethan's name pounding in her skull. She ran alongside the gurney as paramedics pushed him through double doors, their voices a blur of medical terms she couldn't decipher. His lips were pale, his skin gray, a sheen of sweat gathering along his brow. His eyes fluttered open for a second and found her. Just 1 second, but enough to shatter her. "Ethan," she whispered, breath trembling. "I am right here." His fingers twitched, reaching for her, but the paramedics pulled the stretcher away, pushing him toward the critical care wing. "Stay," he murmured, voice thin as smoke. She nodded, tears streaming. "I am not leaving." They disappeared behind emergency doors, and she was left in the hallway, gripping the cold metal rail, her entire body trembling. Minutes passed, then an hour, then another. A doctor finally approached, clipboard in hand, expression serious. "He's in cardiac crisis," the doctor said. "His heart is failing faster than his medication can compensate. We stabilized him, but only temporarily." The next part made Lena's knees weaken. "We need consent for a surgical intervention. A transplant risk profile has already been prepared." Lena blinked. "Consent, but I am not family." The doctor frowned. "His advance directive lists no next of kin. You were the only contact number he provided." Her breath caught. He listed her. He trusted her. The doctor continued. "We need to know if we should proceed if his heart stops again. He has refused surgery before, but right now, refusing would be fatal." Lena pressed a hand to her mouth. The thought of choosing life or death for him made her stomach twist into knots. "I cannot decide," that she whispered, voice cracking. "He has to choose. He has to say it himself." The doctor nodded. "Then we need him awake, stable, communicative." "Pray he wakes." Lena waited outside his room, pacing, gripping the edges of her sleeves until her knuckles turned white. Through the glass, she saw him lying motionless, surrounded by machines. His chest rose shallowly, the steady beep of monitors tapping at her nerves like tiny hammers. Hours stretched impossibly thin. Paparazzi gathered outside the hospital main entrance, shouting questions about the gallery collapse, about their relationship, about the will scandal. Security kept them back, but their presence felt like poison, creeping under the door. Around 2 in the morning, Ethan stirred. The nurse called her in. Lena rushed to his bedside, heart pounding. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, as if fighting through water. When he saw her, his lips quivered in the faintest smile. "You came," he whispered. She let out a broken breath. "Of course I came." His gaze drifted upward to the ceiling, heavy with exhaustion. "I am sorry you saw me like that." She shook her head fiercely. "I am sorry you went 60 days without me," she whispered. His brow furrowed, not understanding. Then his expression softened. "Those 60 days hurt," he murmured. "Everything hurt." Her eyes filled. The doctor entered quietly, clearing his throat. "Mr. Hale, you need to make a decision regarding surgery." Ethan blinked, turning his gaze toward Lena, as though she were the only anchor he trusted. "Surgery," he repeated weakly. The doctor explained again, calmly. "Without it, your heart could fail permanently. You may not survive another episode." Ethan closed his eyes. The word surgery echoed in his mind, tangled with years of fear, old trauma, and the deep, stubborn belief that he did not deserve another chance at life. "I refused this before," he whispered. The doctor nodded, but circumstances have changed. His eyes drifted back to Lena. She stepped closer, gripping the railing. "Ethan," she whispered, "you once told me you demanded I stay every night because the silence was killing you faster than the disease." His breath trembled. It was true. She reached for his hand, gently intertwining her fingers with his. "Well, now I demand something," she whispered fiercely. "Stay alive." His throat tightened, emotion flickering across his face like a fragile flame. "I do not know if I can." "Yes, you can," she insisted. "But you have to want to." He swallowed. "You will leave again." She shook her head, tears spilling. "I left because you asked me to. I am only here because I choose to be." His chest rose shakily. "Lena, I am afraid." She bent closer, forehead nearly touching his. "So am I. But I am more afraid of a world where you are gone." That truth sliced through him. Something shifted in his eyes. Something awakening. Something choosing. He squeezed her hand weakly. "Then I will fight," he whispered. "I will choose the surgery." The doctor nodded immediately. "We prep in 30 minutes. Lena's breath trembled with relief and fear. They wheeled Ethan down the hall, the fluorescent lights flickering above him. He stared upward until Lena slipped into view, walking beside the stretcher. "Stay where I can see you," he whispered. She nodded. "Always." At the operating room door, they stopped her. "Only medical personnel beyond this point, ma'am." She froze, gripping his hand tightly. Ethan looked at her, his eyes dark with exhausted determination. "You made me choose life," he whispered. "I will come back to you." She bent down, pressing her forehead to his, their breaths mingling for a single fleeting moment. "Come back to me, Ethan, please." His voice trembled. "I will try." They pulled him away. The doors shut. The red light above the operating room flicked on. Surgery in progress. Lena collapsed into a chair, hands over her mouth, tears silently streaming as the minutes stretched into eternity. 4 hours passed. 6, 12. Nurses moved around her, bringing water, offering blankets, speaking soft reassurances. She refused them all. She could only stare at the glowing red light, willing it to turn green. After 14 hours, the door finally opened. The surgeon stepped out exhausted, pulling off his mask. Lena shot to her feet, heart slamming. "Is he alive?" The surgeon paused, then nodded slowly. "Yes." The transplant was successful. "He is stable." Lena gasped a sob of relief, breaking from her chest, knees nearly giving out. But the surgeon added carefully, "Recovery will be long, serious, and he will need someone with him, someone he trusts." Lena wiped her tears. "I am not going anywhere," she whispered. "Not now, not ever." Behind the glass, she saw Ethan resting peacefully, a soft, rhythmic beep, marking the miracle she had begged the universe for. He had chosen life. And for the first time in years, the night inside him was no longer silent. 6 months later, the California sun warmed the balcony outside Ethan's recovery suite, casting long gold strokes across the city skyline. The ocean breeze drifted in, carrying the faint salt scent of the Pacific. It felt like a different world from the one he had nearly died in. It felt like a world he had finally decided to step into instead of watching from behind glass. Ethan stood leaning lightly against the railing, a soft gray sweater draped over his now healthier frame. His scars were still tender, his movements slower, but each breath came without the old stutter of fear. Behind him, Lena slid open the balcony door, carrying 2 mugs of chamomile steam curling into the air. "Morning tea," she said softly, placing one near his hand. He took it, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. "You always remember." She smiled, leaning against the railing beside him. "I remember the important things." He glanced at her profile, illuminated by the rising sun. She looked different too, not because her hair was longer or because her clothes were brighter, but because something inside her had softened. The burden she once carried alone had finally found a place to rest. "You know," Ethan said, clearing his throat, "the night you pulled me off that gallery floor, I thought it was the end." She turned to him, eyes gentle. "It was the beginning." He let out a small laugh. "You always contradict me, only when you are wrong." He shook his head, how amusement warmed his expression. His gaze drifted toward the interior of the suite, where boxes of art supplies and medical instructions sat in an organized corner. Their strange shared life, temporary yet somehow permanent. She nudged him lightly. "You seem far away." "Just thinking," he murmured. "6 months ago I thought I had nothing left to offer this world. Now I am planning a foundation for transplant patients and buying paintbrushes by the dozen." Her cheeks warmed. "You did not have to invest in my studio. I wanted to." He met her eyes. "The world almost lost you because of me, Lena. The least I could do was help you build something that keeps you breathing." She looked down at her mug, blinking at the sudden sting in her eyes. "You helped me build more than a studio," she whispered. "You helped me believe I deserved more than survival." Ethan reached for her hand, brushing his thumb lightly over her knuckles. "You saved every part of me that wasn't completely dead yet." She shook her head. "You saved yourself. I just stood beside you while you tried." A soft silence settled between them, the kind that came only after people had walked through fire together. She took a small breath, then asked quietly, "Do you miss Seattle?" He considered it. The rain, the cold, the memories trapped in Hale Manor like ghosts behind every curtain. "No," he said, "not anymore." She nodded. "I am glad." He tilted his head gently. "And you, do you miss it?" She looked out at the ocean waves crashing steadily against the shore. "I miss my mother's garden. I miss how the air smelled after rain. But I do not miss who I was there." He smiled faintly. "Then we stay here. Unless or until you want something else." Her eyes softened. "What if I want something unpredictable? Something not on a contract? Something not owed or demanded?" Ethan set his mug down, turning fully toward her. His eyes were warm, steady, and for the first time unafraid. Then you tell me." She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "I want to know what staying looks like. Not because of your illness, not because of a job, not because you needed someone to sit in the silence, but because I choose you." The world paused. Ethan stepped closer, their breaths mingling in the morning air. His fingers brushed her cheek, feather light tracing the line of her jaw. He whispered, "Lena, I never asked you for anything real because I was afraid that if I did, you would leave." Her heart tightened. "Ethan," he swallowed emotion shimmering in his voice. "But you came back. You chose to. And I am not wasting another second pretending I do not want you beside me." She exhaled a trembling laugh. "Then say it." He cupped her face gently, guiding her closer. "Stay with me, Lena. Stay every night. Stay because you want to, not because you must. Stay because living with you feels like the first real breath I have taken in years." Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming simplicity of truth. She leaned into his touch, whispering, "I choose you every night." His forehead rested against hers, the morning sun warming their skin. He closed his eyes, releasing a breath that felt like the final exhale of a man who had stopped running from the past. He whispered against her lips, "Then every night from now on is by choice." She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "A choice I will keep making." They stood in silence as the sun rose higher, painting the world in gold. No monitors, no panic, no secrets haunting the corners of the room. Only two people who had found each other at the edge of their breaking points and decided to live anyway, every night by choice. If you made it to the end of this story, take a deep breath and allow yourself a moment to feel everything these two souls just walked through together. Their journey was not just about heart failure or scandal or lonely nights in a quiet mansion. It was about choosing life when life had already taken so much. It was about showing up for someone even when the world tried to twist that love into something ugly. And most of all, it was about recognizing that sometimes the person who saves you is not the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who stays the longest. If this story touched you even a little bit, I want to invite you to do something small but meaningful. Leave a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from. I love seeing this community come together from every corner of the globe. Your cities and your stories make this channel feel alive, and I read every single one of them. And if you felt a connection to Lena and Ethan, their pain, their healing, their second chance, then let me know your favorite moment from their journey. Was it the night he told her he demanded she stay because the silence was killing him faster than the disease? Was it the moment she opened the forbidden curtain and finally saw the truth he had buried for years? Was it the collapse at the gallery when she shielded him from the cameras with her own body? Or was it the final morning on the balcony, the first morning where living was a choice, not a burden? Your words matter more than you know. They help this channel grow, but more importantly, they help us understand the kinds of stories that resonate with you, the ones that keep you watching late into the night. And if you want more stories like this, ones filled with cinematic emotion, slow burn tension, impossible choices, and the kind of love that saves instead of destroys, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. That way you will never miss tomorrow's story. Every day we are building something here, a little sanctuary for people who love romance that hurts before it heals, who love characters who break before they bloom, who love endings that feel earned, not forced. You belong in this space. And if you want to support the channel even further, share this story with someone who believes in second chances, or someone who needs a reminder that hope can survive anything, even a failing heart. Before you go, tell me in the comments what kind of story you want to see next. Do you want more billionaire romances? More modern healing arcs? More Western slow burn love stories? More contract turned? Love emotional undulation journeys? Your ideas shape this channel. Your voice helps guide every twist, every hook, every ending. If you want something specific, something bold, something you have never seen before, drop it in the comments and I will craft it for you. And finally, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Reading, feeling, and breathing with these characters. Thank you for trusting Emma's stories to bring you tales that linger long after the screen fades to black. Till tomorrow night, my friend, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and remember love that is chosen is love that endures.